Hey everybody, this is Tim. I just want to do a longer version of the talk about my new book, and that book is War Pigeons: The Operations and Gear of the US Army Pigeon Corps. So I did a short 5-minute video about it, and I figured that some people would want a lot more detailed information, and just kind of talk about some of the interesting things about this book and some of the challenges that I had writing the book. So I'm going to try and keep my voice in the upper range. This microphone tends to drop me off when I go in the lower range. So I'm going to try and stay in my falsetto range. So this is my 4th book. And before we get too far into it, I know not everyone's going to watch all the way to the end. So let me go to this. If you're interested in any of these books, this is where you find them. You can go to lulu.com. This is a print-on-demand company, and the Pigeon book is 305 pages. The soft cover is $37.99, and the hardcover is $52.99. This is also where you can buy any of my other books. So, and you just search on my name, Tim Scherrer, Scherrer, and it should come up. These will also be distributed to Amazon. Although if you have a choice between buying it on Amazon or on Lulu, please buy it on Lulu. Now, these books are print on demand, and you can get them, and they have printers all over the world. So you can order them in the UK, or you can order them in Europe or Australia, and they'll get printed there and shipped to you. And it usually takes me about a week. And I've had very good luck with this company, and this is the 4th book. Okay, so let's just kind of talk about just everything in general. My first book, and actually, War Pigeons, the first book that I've actually written to be a book. I started with a template and started writing on it. First book, master's thesis, 3 chapters, 4th chapter. This was really almost 20 years getting this done. So learned quite a bit in that one. The second one, again, was never meant to be a book. It was something that I've written in grad school, and I finally went ahead and put it together in a book format. Border State Quandaries, about a doctor in the Civil War gets himself into some trouble here in Boone County, Missouri. So, relatively small book. It's under 100 pages. And then my third book, The Men in the Khaki Cloth, U.S. Army chaplain and soldier gear in World War II. Again, this was not really meant to be a book. This was a series of articles about chaplains that I wrote, and I shared with some people, and they liked it. So I went ahead and sewed it together and made it into a book. I recently did a revision on this and made it color. And this is, it's like a 100-page book, and it comes in $17, and it's usually like $12 more. So if you're into that, or you like my book, my War Pigeon book, you might be interested in this book also. Although this one isn't, it doesn't have a bibliography and footnotes, things like that. So it's really designed more just to present the material and be done with it. Okay, so let's just talk about War Pigeon. This was a really fun book to write. It's 305 pages. It's printed in color. And I went with the standard color printing rather than the very, very high quality printing. And the results are actually pretty decent. And for me to use that higher quality printing, it would have cost more than double the book. And that would have put the book at about $100. And my goal for this book was to keep it about $35, and the hardcover under, and I'm pretty close to that. So let's just talk about this whole process. I finished the chaplain book, and I just decided that I wanted to write another book, and I decided it was time to do something about my pigeon collection. So that's how it got going. How did I get into pigeon collecting? Well, I don't actually have birds myself. I do have one bird. I have Barney, who's my model for the PG-106 CD. And my cat, who usually lays next to me, really likes Barney, so we've got to keep Barney. We got to protect Barney. So, and I've got some other fake pigeons that go into my gear, but I don't actually have any birds. So I actually acquired a cage at some point, um, a, uh, a PG-100, the small airborne drop container. And then when I was in Europe, for 60th D-Day, I was with a Belgian friend of mine, and we saw some pigeon gear, and he says, "Oh yeah, I'll send you some of that." So about a month later, this PG-106 shows up in the mail with some message holders. And then over time, I collected some other pieces of gear. And then I also got a friend of mine was selling his collection, and I ended up picking up some of his more rare pieces there. And I have a pretty comprehensive collection. I've got quite a bit of stuff. So I decided, it's time for me to really do something about it. And no one had really done anything in the marketplace. So I just finished the chaplain book the weekend prior. So I sat down on June the 12th. Today is the 20th of July. So that's how quick this thing came together. So I started working. I opened a template and just started from scratch. And I just kept finding more material. And I became somewhat obsessive about writing this book. I easily have 150 hours over the course of about 5 weeks in this book. And that's a lot, but my summer schedule, because I work in a school, I work shorter hours in the summer so I could write before I went to work. I could write, start in the afternoon. There were weekends where I would flip open the computer at 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning and write until 11 o'clock at night, and dinner. I forgot to feed the cat a couple days. You had to remind me of that. And then I actually then I come home from work maybe about 2:30, and by 3 o'clock I was writing, and I'd write until it was time to go to bed. So I got quite a bit done, and I was able to locate quite a bit of material to fill in what I didn't have. So originally this was just going to be a book about World War II pigeon, and it just kept expanding and expanding and expanding. So finally I said, okay, I got to cut this off. I got to cut it off at 300 pages. And I ended up at 305, but I easily found stuff that I could have done probably another 200. So I cut it off, and if this book does well, I'll track down some of that other material that I ran into and maybe start packaging that for a part two. But for now, we'll just see how this goes. Oh, by the way, over my shoulder here, this is and maybe a little hard to see, but that's actually a frame picture of G.I. Joe from an advertisement. And that particular bookshelf has the different books that I've where I kind of keep them autograph copies and stuff. Anyway, G.I. Joe's looking over my left shoulder there. So a few years ago, I did a pigeon display with a lady named Tamara out of the Peoria area, and she has live birds, bird rescue, and she has live pigeons, and she actually uses the World War II gear for her birds. And so I spent a weekend displaying with her, and she kind of showed me a lot of different things. And so that was pretty interesting. So that's another angle that I have. And I actually, as I was writing the book, I actually sent it to her so she could look at it and say, okay, you're saying something really stupid about pigeons. Because I'm not a bird person. She is, and she read through it and she thought it was good. I also had a friend of mine edit the book for the historical copies in there, or historical issues in there. And also, one thing I used that worked really, really well is there's a read aloud feature under review in Word. So you can go there and you can have it read it back to you. And then that really helps. A lot of times I'll hear things a lot easier than I'll actually see them. So I would go through that. And that was, that actually made the book itself come together very, very quickly and cleanly. Biggest part were the pictures. Oh my gosh, I don't know how many pictures are in there. Probably around 320 at this point. And in those 320 pictures, if you've ever edited documents, and you put a period on the end of the sentence, and then next thing you know, the picture pushes down on the next page and then jacks up the entire chapter. So that's been one of my challenges with it. So I also went through, and one of the first things I did was I created the large list of air, um, and I went ahead and added all the nomenclature that I could find from the different catalogs. And I've got everything. I think there's one item in that entire list that's, I'm not sure what it is. And then, and some of the numbers on the PG list were not used. But, okay, so let me go ahead and just talk through the book and kind of talk through some of the issues that I had with the book. Again, here's the cover of it. If you haven't seen it, it's orange and white, Signal Corps colors. So that's, yeah, I like the way that the cover turned out, like the picture. I was going to use a different picture, and then I couldn't find the one I wanted, and then I used this one, and I actually kind of like it. It's actually a 279th Signal Pigeon Company guy in Italy, and he's got a rattle container, and that's how he calls his pigeon for dinner. So here's the book itself. I'm not going to try and read you the book, and I don't want to go into too many details here. Again, the table of contents, and that's actually on the Lulu page. And then I kind of tell the story about how I got into this, and then Army pigeon terminology is covered in here. So a lot of people that are into the Army side of things don't know the pigeon side, and a lot of people that are in the pigeon side don't know the Army side. So I figured this would help both sides. An introduction, talk about what the focus of this book is. Understand this book is not a story of heroic pigeons. Individual pigeons like G.I. Joe and some of the other more famous ones. There's plenty of books out there about that. This is really from a point of view of the gear and how the Signal Pigeon Corps operated during 1917 until 1957. And the Signal Pigeon Corps, the Signal Pigeon Company is really the focus of that. That's the field unit that went to the field for the Pigeon Corps and actually got the message through. So here's the World War I section. I don't cover World War I other than I don't cover it in tremendous detail. There's a great article written by someone that was an Army Heritage magazine that covers that, and it's in the bibliography, and I refer someone to that. But I say enough to set the stage for that. And then yes, the World War I section and the World War I victory parade. So there's lofts on parade with captured birds. And then we go into the interwar period. You can't really understand World War II and technology of World War II without understanding the interwar period. And that's why I covered it in detail. So this is the establishment of the permanent Pigeon Corps. Lofts get built in 1921. And then there's some different recruiting things. Also show some of the different equipment that they have, the express canopy truck here, and then also the Harley up there. And then so when the Signal Pigeon Corps goes into World War II, it really consists of one main loft at Monmouth, which before 1925 was known as Camp Bale. And then there's some scattered lofts out at some of the different headquarters, field units, things like that. But it's not that big. It's maybe 200 personnel and a couple thousand. So the Signal Pigeon Corps expands rapidly and ends up with 12 companies in the field. Of those 12 companies, 8 of them deployed into theaters of war, 5 to Europe, 1 to CBI, and 2 to the Pacific Theater. So they had to expand the Pigeon Corps, not just as personnel, but they also had to expand it in terms of birds. So they actually went out and got quite a few donated birds. That's how they did it in World War I. That's how they did it in World War II. Then I cover quite a bit of the different experimentation. The Air Corps tried to model the RAF, what they did with it, and then also things with night flying. The K9 program, which worked they basically patterned the German World War II gear, and it didn't work so well, so they had to actually create some different gear, different birds. The other thing is the pigeon program moved from Fort Monmouth to Camp Crowder, Missouri in 1943. Then I get into the Signal Pigeon Company organization. Again, in the back of the book, I've got the table of organization equipment. And I've drawn up these charts. If you want to see, the Signal Pigeon Company had a lot of vehicles, and it was a very big, heavy unit. It's 151 soldiers, but I think there's 49 pieces of rolling stock in there. Jeeps, trucks, everything, you name it. And also the different lofts that they have. So if you load everything up in the Signal Pigeon Company and their vehicles, you still have not moved everything. And I estimated you need 30, I think it's 32, 34 different 2.5-ton trucks. You want to get everything in one trip. It's a lot of stuff. And it's a very unique organization too. And I show you how it fits in the larger Signal Corps picture. And typically a Signal Pigeon Company was assigned to a field army. Now I go into the Signal Pigeon Company histories and understand that these are a hot mess. You start looking into them, and there's all sorts of errors that I found in there. Units were designated the wrong, some of them were listed as battalions, some were listed as platoons when they were really companies. And it's just, and to keep things even more complicated, like the very first unit, the second Signal Pigeon Company, which deploys to the Louisiana maneuvers, ends up splitting, and it forms the 280th Signal Pigeon Company. And then there's another piece of it goes another direction. And it's just really, really complicated. And I don't try and tell the story of every single Signal Pigeon Company. I try to give a paragraph and give you an idea of where they were. But each of these Signal Pigeon Companies could take an entire chapter. So if someone wants to write a book about pigeons, there you go. That's one that you could do. And there are several books out there by World War II pigeoneers. And let me give you some examples of why I say this is a hot mess. Some of the different books, let me take a drink of water here. Some of the different sources. Let me go back. There are 8 Signal Pigeon Companies that go overseas. 5 of them go to Europe. One is in Italy, 4 are in the main part of Europe, in France, Belgium, and 2 go to, one goes more Southeast Asia, one goes more Southwest Asia, one goes to China, Burma, India. And then there's 4 that are stateside. 2 of them are with the Army Air Corps. I think 1303rd, 1306th, or 7th. One is assigned to Pope Field, North Carolina. The other one, the sources say it's assigned to Bakersfield, California. Well, there is no Bakersfield, California I can find. There is a Bakersfield Army Airfield that exists. And then I find out there's a debt of them that goes up to Alaska at the air base, where they're shuffling aircraft to the Russians up there, and they've got a debt up there. So it's things like that just kind of made me crazy when I was going through this, and I tried to give you the best look at what it really is. And then there were 2 Signal Pigeon Companies that were part of the training base, and there's the 828th Signal Pigeon Replacement Company, which is for training pigeoneers, and they train pigeoneers to go into the Signal Pigeon Companies and the different lofts that may still be around the U.S., as well as some pigeoneers were trained for the OSS as well. I don't really cover OSS as part of this. That's a whole other story, but the training and a lot of the gear came out of this structure. Then there's the 829th Signal Pigeon Service Company, which is a breeding operation, and they help work with different pigeon gear and design, things like that. And then there's an Army Signal Pigeon Service agency that's located at the Philadelphia Army Signal Corps Depot. And that's kind of those three elements, the 828th, 829th, and the agency in Philadelphia were the components that sustained signal pigeon companies in the field. Now, when you get into the histories of this, you'll find that the 828th many times is commonly called the 829th Signal Pigeon Replacement Training Company, and that's it makes no sense why the Army would have two 829ths, one being a service company and one being a replacement training company. So I'm reasonably sure that one is the 828th and one is the 829th. That's the kind of junk that you run into. Also, the unit that went to North Africa was called like the North Africa Signal Pigeon Platoon. Then it became like the 68 81st, and it became the 279. So it's very, very sticky and complicated. And there may be some things that need to be corrected in here in later editions because it's a mess when you get into it. I found one book that's written about Camp Crowder that had pigeons showing up a year earlier. And that may be that somewhere there, I'm not sure, but just like almost all the pigeon facts in there just were not consistent with the Army sources. And I'm going to go with the Army sources versus someone who's telling some stories about Camp Crowder. So here's just a little bit about each of the different signal pigeon companies. Those wedding pictures are of a first sergeant who I believe was with the 280th Signal Pigeon Company, and he was part of 3rd Army. Okay. And then I talk about the demobilization. They had to dispose of all these birds when they came back from Europe. Many of them were sold off to the Brits overseas or the French, and they actually then pulled back their program and went back to a pre-war sized breeding program using a lot of their Army pigeons, all of which had been moved to Camp Crowder in 1946. They all go back to Fort Monmouth. Then I get into the Cold War pigeon program. You know, one of the interesting things I ran into while doing this is the question of WWII pigeoneers. And I've come down based, my position on that is I don't think that there were trained WWII pigeoneers during World War II for a couple of reasons. Number one, I can't find anything on them. They're not in the WWII history. They're not in the WWII history book about the Signal Corps section. There's a lot in there, but nothing about pigeon. And then also that the Signal Pigeon Training Company, the goal of that was to feed the signal pigeon companies that deployed to the field. And typically a signal pigeon company went to a field army. And you wouldn't find WWIIs generally at that level. So now there are some possibilities that they were in the 2 Air Corps Signal Pigeon Companies, the 1103rd, 1106th, or 7th, or maybe at the they would have been the 828th Training Company because those were training guys who go into the signal pigeon companies that deploy in the field. So they might have been in the 829th, or maybe working in the Signal Pigeon Agency. I'm not sure, but the only thing I can find on WWII pigeoneers during World War II is there's a video from 1943 of some WWIIs tossing a bird. And they're in dress uniforms. It's trying to get women to join the WWIIs. So I'm not convinced that that isn't just something that they did as a publicity stunt. I do find that by 1947 in the records of the Senate Armed Services Committee that there were post-war WWII pigeoneers. So, and that's something else someone can get into if they want to. Now, there was a very successful program that the RAF had with female pigeoneers, and then also the Navy had female pigeoneers in the waves, but I can't find them in the Army. I'd like to tell that story if I could, but it's not there. I don't think it's there. You got to go with the facts. A lot of people aren't familiar with the service during the Korean War. A Signal Pigeon Company went and served during the Korean War. Can't find much on it. Can't even find the unit designation of it, but there's plenty of documentary evidence of it. That they were actually there. So they probably went a few months after the war started. There was a big expansion of the Signal Corps units coming out of the 8th Army Signal Officer requested a bunch of units. And I know for sure the birds came home in 1954 because I've seen pictures of them getting unloaded in Fort Monmouth. I'd like to use those pictures, but I don't have rights to them. And also understand a lot of these pictures, I had to pay some good money to get some of the stuff. So I've got quite a bit invested in this book. Okay, and this is the closure of the program. I actually have this is the order that closes the program at Fort Monmouth. And then 1960, they create this bird bath memorial. And it was around the chapel at Fort Monmouth. No one seems to know where this went. I've heard rumors that it may be at Aberdeen. Not sure where that went, but it was removed probably about 10 years ago. And then I show you what Fort Monmouth looks like today, which is no longer an active installation. Then I conclude on the story of the pigeon program. Then I start going into the different gear and understand I'm at page 93 and there's 305 pages to go in this book. That's how much this book has on gear and operations. So these are the different forms. They did not change significantly with one exception. The monthly report did change during World War II, and it started adding the different PG items. My guess is that the Chief of Signal Corps wanted to know how much gear was in the field for those signal units. Also, they changed how the pigeons were banded and marked because they had so many birds that came from outside the Army during World War II. So they quit listing the place of birth and just used the USA number. Some of the different manuals and books that are out there, some of the popular media things. These two books are excellent sources on the Signal Pigeon Corps, the pigeons that went to war, and also then there's a history of that 282nd Signal Pigeon Company. This book is $500. You can find a copy of it. Courageous Couriers, another similar book. I think it's written by the same guy that did this book. And Chanso's another one. If you're looking for good pigeon stories, that's probably where to go. Here's an article that occurred during World War II in radio news. And then also there was a movie about that includes signal pigeons. The Pigeon That Took Rome came out in 1960, 1962. Here's some coloring book pages. And then we go into all the different gear. There's the pigeon gear, World War I during the interwar period. These are the lower number PG items. And I divide all of this gear into three broad categories. There's the World War I and interwar gear. There's the early World War II gear, which would be like the PG-51, a lot of that gear. And then experience in the field in 1942, 1943, then drives the change, what I call the change one. By change one, I mean the table of organization and equipment changes in 1944 for the Signal Pigeon Company, and it brings in all the 100 series items, the different airdrop cages and the wooden box cages that a lot of people are more familiar with, the two-bird and the four-bird. The different gear that the pigeoneers use, and then I actually go through and try and track all of the PG baskets. Now, World War I era gear and interwar period are all rattan and wicker construction. That's why I call them baskets. And everything World War II forward that's made of metal and wood, I tend to call containers. Although I do put the nomenclature that the Army used, cage, box, whatever, it's also included in there. And the gas cover, feed trays, there's some unidentified stuff. Here's the Harleys that they used, I believe Harley Model J's. The small trailer, the Pigeon Mobile here, 1930 Chevy. And then there's these trailer lofts, which look more like wagons that are pulled by teams of horses, mules, things like that. And then fixed facilities. And then we get into the World War II gear. The World War II gear and Cold War gear was so big that I split it into two different sections. The first part of it is the things that were actually worn by pigeons. Second part of it is the gear that was used by pigeoneers. And then the second half of that is the different containers and lofts that were used to house the pigeons. Here's the different leg message containers. There's Barney. He makes his big appearance in the book. And so there's some unusual stuff that's out there also. Bird bath pans, the different waters. The English water was used during World War I. It was brought back during Korea. Nesting bowls. Some of these changes that occur during World War II are to stop using glass materials, war shortage materials, metal materials, and to go bowl was actually made of pressed cardboard. Here's the different message books, the pigeon tracing paper, and then also, again, these are the M series items. PG series items generally stands for pigeon gear, or PG is maybe how, I'm not sure. That's 100% sure that stands for PG gear, but that's how I always think of it. And then the M series, the miscellaneous series gear, which would be the message books. And also I include the M209B converter, which is used for encoding messages. Now we get into the World War II different containers. And many of these are used until the end of the program. The PG-51, which actually gets taken out of service by mid-war. And these are the traditional bird boxes, the 102, 104 that a lot of people are familiar with. And then the 107 cardboard fiberboard, which actually was used quite a bit during the Korean War. A lot of people don't know that. Here's the K9 containers. These are almost exact copies of what the Germans used. And actually these created some problems. I don't think I covered it in the book, but they had to redesign these because they were causing problems with the birds' wings getting damaged. And then I go into the airborne containers. These are the ones that are used to drop pigeons to the ground to then be used on the ground. That whole series, these are the what I call the change one items. And this red thing is the container that held the parachute. It's held by a shroud line. And then there's some kind of random boxes that they'll come up for sale, kind of comment on those. And then there's the ones that are actually used on board aircraft. The US Army actually did use RAF containers in North Africa. They had their own stuff that they created also. Then I get into the different trailer lofts, stateside ones. They had 50 of these, and the PG-68 TB trailer bantam loft. And some variations, and there's also a variation built on the Ben-Hur, and also there's a Korean War M105. That trailer came out in 1953, and clearly there was at least one trailer built, because there it is right there. There's the portable loft, PG-46. Again, portable. Everything is portable if you have enough people to move it, and these were small enough that you could put them in the back of a deuce and a half and haul them around. And then also talk a little bit about the Army standard plans for lofts. This is the list of all the different pigeon gear. As you can see, there's a lot there. There was a lot of work that went into this. And a company that sold pigeon cages to the Army is listed there. The 1920 catalog items that they have. Here's the class 9, 19, I think it's 1943, 44 listing of the different pigeon items. And then I show you the Korean War gear, which no one knows anything about. And then there's the Signal Pigeon Company, the TO&E. Shows you how many soldiers they have, what equipment they have. Fascinating to look at the TO&E. Pigeoneers that actually were in the combat platoons got grease guns and carbines. And they also got a shotgun in case there's a problem with some other birds in the area. The soldiers that were in the company headquarters all got 1903 Springfield. That says how far behind the lines they thought that they were going to be. I couldn't imagine that in 1944, 1945, that a TO&E would even have a Springfield on it unless it's a sniper or something like that, sniper rifle. But that's what they had. They had bolt action rifles. That's how far down they were on. We're kind of going through the different changes that are listed in there. And then this is the list of the Army's Signal Pigeon service stations that in 1918, the Army went really big, really quick. From 1917 to 1918, they created over 80 lofts. Some of them were training lofts, some of them were headquarters lofts, some of them were with divisions, and some of them were with the Air Corps. Here's the bib, here's the index. Again, it's a very, very detailed index. And then there's something funny kind of here at the end. If you buy the book, you may want to go check that out. So that's the book. Again, if you're interested in it, you can get it from lulu.com. Again, $37.99 for the printed book. Soft cover, hardcover is a little bit more, $52.99. 305 pages. I hope you enjoyed the book. So anyway, this is my long version of the talk. And if there's any issues, comments, things like that, just let me know. So anyway, hope you enjoy the book and have a good night.